The late-night text arrived. "Working late," he said. A familiar, comforting excuse, but a new chilling doubt crept in. Her heart began to pound. A phone clutched in her hand. A map glowing on the screen. His car a tiny miles away from his office building. Not where it should be. A perfect marriage, she thought. Or a perfect devastating lie. A single unsettling thought. A quiet betrayal. The beginning of an end or a truth yet untold. Ilara Vance stared at the glowing screen, her breath catching in her throat. Kenji had sent a text just an hour ago. Stuck at the office, big deadline, home late. It was a message she'd grown accustomed to, a refrain that had become increasingly frequent over the past few months. But tonight, a cold prickle of unease had urged her to open the family's shared GPS app. What she saw made her stomach churn, the tiny familiar downtown office garage. Instead, it was miles away, deep in the city's industrial district, an area she barely recognized. Her fingers, trembling, navigated to Aisha's contact. It was past midnight, but Ilara knew her best friend would answer. "Aisha," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's Kenji, his GPS. It's not adding up." Aisha's sleepy voice crackled through the phone, trying to make sense of the fragmented information. "Maybe a client meeting, off-site?" Aisha suggested, her tone laced with a forced optimism. "Or he stopped for gas, forgot to turn it off, and then got a ride to work." Ilara shook her head, though Aisha couldn't see it. "No, it's parked. And it's been there for hours. This isn't just a detour, Aisha. This feels wrong." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken fears. Sleep was an impossible luxury. Ilara dressed in the dark, her movements precise and deliberate, fueled by a simmering blend of dread and resolution. She couldn't just sit there not knowing. The industrial district was a labyrinth of shadowed warehouses and abandoned loading docks, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete and forgotten dreams. Her luxury sedan, a stark contrast to the grime, navigated the desolate streets, guided by the insistent. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she finally spotted it, Kenji's, its windows reflecting the sliver of moonlight. Ilara parked a safe distance away, the engine of her car still running, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Her gaze was fixed on Kenji's car, a silent, dark sentinel in the pre-dawn gloom. She switched off her headlights, plunging her own vehicle into deeper shadow, and watched. Minutes stretched into an eternity. No movement, no sign of Kenji. A terrifying thought began to form. What if he wasn't alone? What if this was a rendezvous? With a surge of desperate courage, she cautiously approached his car on foot. As she peered through the tinted driver's side window, her breath hitched. It wasn't a woman, or a bag, or even a stack of files. Instead, nestled on the passenger seat, was a small, crudely made wooden box, and beside it, a glint of something metallic that sent a shiver of pure terror down her spine. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the desolate silence of the industrial district. Her earlier fear of infidelity now felt almost quaint, replaced by a cold dread that clung to her like the pre-dawn mist. The crude wooden box, nestled on the passenger seat of Kenji's luxury sedan, seemed to pulse with an unseen malevolence. Beside it, the tarnished silver locket with its peculiar, intertwined symbol glinted faintly, a beacon of unsettling mystery. Overcoming a wave of nausea, she carefully opened the car door, the soft click echoing too loudly in the stillness. Her fingers still trembling reached for the box. Inside, beneath the locket, lay a few old, discolored photographs, their faces faded, their smiles hauntingly unfamiliar. This was no casual rendezvous. This was something profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. She quickly snapped pictures with her smartphone, her movements jerky and desperate, before gently replacing the box and closing the door, as if not to disturb a sleeping monster. Driving away from the labyrinth of shadowed warehouses, Ilara's mind raced, trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. The rising sun cast a deceptive warmth over the city skyline, but her world remained steeped in a chilling twilight. She pulled over to a dimly lit side street, her hands still clenching the steering wheel, and dialed Aisha. Her voice, when it came, was a tight whisper, brittle with suppressed panic. "Aisha, it's not what we thought, it's worse." She recounted seeing the wooden box, the strange locket, and the unsettling, faded photographs of unfamiliar faces. Aisha, her voice thick with sleep, struggled to process the bizarre details. Photos, Alara? In a strange locket? What on earth could Kenji be doing with something like that? Alara could only shake her head, tears welling in her. I don't know, but my gut screams danger. This feels like something out of a nightmare, and I'm wide awake. The silence on the line was punctuated only by Alara's ragged breathing, a stark contrast to the burgeoning light outside. Back in the quiet sanctuary of their home, Alara tried to compose herself, the echoes of the industrial district still rattling in her mind. Kenji arrived soon after, looking utterly exhausted but otherwise normal. He offered a perfunctory kiss, mumbling about a successful but grueling night that had stretched into the early morning. Alara forced a brittle smile, her heart a frantic hummingbird in her chest. As they sat over coffee, the aroma doing little to soothe her nerves, she decided to probe. You know, I took a wrong turn this morning, she began casually, stirring her mug. Ended up near those old industrial docks. Rough area. She watched Kenji's face intently, a subtle flicker in his... He stiffened imperceptibly, his hand gripping his coffee mug a little too tightly. Oh, rough area. You should be more careful driving around there at night, love, he said, his tone a mix of concern and a subtle, almost imperceptible warning. The air thickened with unspoken tension. A silent battle of wills played out over breakfast. The moment Kenji left for work, Alara snatched her smartphone, her fingers flying to the photos she'd taken in the dead of night. She zoomed in on the tarnished silver locket, the intricate, intertwined knot symbol now starkly clear. It looked ancient, vaguely occult, sending a chill down her spine. Next, she scrutinized the faded faces in the old photographs, trying to discern any features, any hint of recognition. Her anxiety mounted with each passing minute. Hours blurred into a frantic online search, typing in keywords related to the symbol, the industrial district, and anything that hinted at its unsettling aura. Finally, buried deep in a local history blog, a small obscure article surfaced. It detailed a series of unsolved disappearances from decades ago, all linked to a secretive society and the very symbol etched on the locket. Alara's breath hitched as she read the last chilling sentence. The victims were often found with a small wooden box near their abandoned vehicles. Alara's mind reeled from the blog post, the chilling connection between the locket, the wooden box, and the decades-old disappearances. The secretive society mentioned felt too real, too close to her own nightmare. She knew she couldn't rely on online searches alone anymore. This required a deeper, more tangible investigation. Driven by a desperate need for answers, she decided to visit the local historical society, hoping to find archived newspapers or records that might shed more light on the obscure events. The old building, with its dusty shelves and hushed atmosphere, felt like stepping into the past, a stark contrast to her modern, unraveling life. Every rustle of paper, every creak of the floorboards, heightened her sense of urgency. She spent hours poring over brittle newsprint, searching for any mention of the intertwined symbol or the specific names from the faded photographs she'd captured on her phone. The scent of old paper and dust filled her nostrils, a constant reminder of the secrets buried within these walls. Each unchecked lead only fueled her determination, pushing her further into the labyrinth of the past. A gasp escaped Alara's lips as it wasn't just a general mention. It detailed the disappearance of a young man, Arthur Finch, and explicitly referenced the Serpent's Coil, a local legend tied to a clandestine group operating in the industrial district. Crucially, the article included a grainy photograph of Finch wearing a locket identical to Kenji's. A wave of nausea washed over her. This wasn't just folklore. It was a tangible link to the horror she'd uncovered in Kenji's car. The report also briefly mentioned a retired police detective, Detective Miles Corbin, who had been obsessed with the cold cases before retiring. He was her next lead, a thread she could finally pull on. She quickly jotted down the details, her hand shaking with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The weight of this discovery was immense, pulling her deeper into a web she never knew existed, a conspiracy that had roots spanning decades and touching lives in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The moment Kenji walked through the door that evening, Alara knew she couldn't pretend any longer. The air in their living room was thick with unspoken questions, heavier than any silence, creating a palpable tension she could almost taste. She watched him shed his lie deepened her unease. "Kenji," she began, her voice steadier than she felt, a fragile shield against her churning emotions. "We need to talk. About your late nights." He paused, his back to her, and she saw the subtle stiffening of his shoulders, a defensive posture that confirmed her worst fears. "I've told you, Alara, work. Big project." She took a deep breath, clutching the printout of the old article behind her back, the paper crinkling faintly. "It's more than work, isn't it? I know about the industrial district. I know about the locket, and I know about the serpent's coil." Kenji spun around, his face paling, the usual calm facade shattering to reveal a flash of fear, then anger. "What are you talking about? You're being paranoid. This is absurd. Kenji's a stranger. You've been digging, haven't you?" he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone that sent a shiver down her spine. "You have no idea what you're messing with, Alara. This isn't some game. You need to stop now, for your own good." His words were a chilling confirmation, far worse than any denial or outright lie, revealing the true depth of his involvement and the perilous nature of his secret. The casual threat in his voice made her realize the immediate danger she was in, that her life was now truly intertwined with this dark mystery. "For my own good?" she challenged, her voice trembling but defiant, refusing to back down. "Or for yours? What have you gotten yourself into, Kenji? What is the serpent's coil?" He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, making her feel small and trapped. "Some things," he whispered, his hand reaching out, not to comfort, but to gently yet firmly take her smartphone from her grasp, his touch unsettlingly possessive. "Are best left buried, and some secrets. They protect us from far worse." The screen of her phone went. Terrifying silence, the true horror of his words sinking in, a profound sense of betrayal washing over her as the door to her safety slammed shut. The silence that followed Kenji's chilling words was more terrifying than any scream. Alara watched, numb with shock, as her smartphone's screen went dark in his hand, severing her last immediate link to the outside world. He stood there, a shadow looming over her, his face a mask of cold resolve that erased every familiar trace of the man she loved. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs, as the full weight of his threat, and the true extent of her isolation, crashed down on her. The air in their elegant living room, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating, charged with a danger she couldn't comprehend. She backed away slowly, her gaze locked on his, searching for any glimmer of the husband she knew, but finding only a stranger, her deepest fears. The casual theft of her phone was a stark declaration. She was now entirely within his control, utterly alone in a nightmare she had unwittingly stumbled into. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but where and how? Hours later, after Kenji had left, ostensibly for work, Alara was a whirlwind of frantic energy. She searched every corner of the house, desperate for another device, a forgotten tablet, an old burner phone, anything to connect with Aisha or Detective Corbin. Her initial terror had morphed into a burning resolve. She couldn't let Kenji's threats paralyze her. She had to fight back, not just for herself, but for the truth. She finally found an old, rarely used tablet tucked away in a drawer, its battery dead. With shaking hands, she plugged it in, watching the charging indicator with an agonizing slowness. When it finally flickered to life, she immediately tried to recall Aisha's number, her mind racing. The moment Aisha's face appeared on the video call, Alara burst into a torrent of words, recounting Kenji's terrifying transformation and the confiscation of her phone. "He knows, Aisha. He knows I've been digging, and he threatened me. He took my phone." Aisha's usually calm demeanor crumpled with concern. "Alara, are you safe? You need to get out of there." Aisha insisted on meeting Alara immediately, and within the hour, they were seated in a secluded booth at a quiet diner, the clatter of plates and hushed conversations providing a thin veil of normalcy against Alara's escalating panic. Alara relayed every detail of Kenji's confrontation, his menacing tone, the way he'd stolen her phone, and the chilling finality of his warning. "He looked at me like I was a stranger, Aisha, like he could..." Hurt me. Aisha gripped Alara's hand tightly, her usual calm replaced by a fierce protectiveness. We need to see Detective Corbin. He's the only one who can truly understand what you've found. They found Corbin's address listed in an old public directory. His small, cluttered apartment was a testament to a life spent chasing shadows. Stacks of old files and newspaper clippings spilling from every surface. The retired detective, a man with weary story, from the GPS coordinates to Kenji's threat. He picked up a tarnished silver locket from his desk, identical to the one Alara had seen, turning it over in his fingers with a look of grim recognition. Detective Corbin cleared his throat, his gaze heavy with years of unspoken burdens. The serpent's coil, it's real, and it's far more dangerous than anyone ever believed. He explained that the society wasn't just a local legend. It was a sophisticated, multi-generational network, with deep roots in the city's power structures. He revealed that the disappearances weren't random, but targeted eliminations of anyone who threatened to expose their activities. They dabble in very old, very dark rituals. And the locket? It's a mark, a binding contract. He then shared a shocking detail. Kenji's grandfather, a prominent, seemingly benevolent figure in the city's history, was a suspected high-ranking member of the coil. I always suspected a lineage, but could never prove it. The revelation sent a cold wave of horror through Alara. Kenji wasn't just involved. He was likely born into it. Corbin then pointed to a faded map tacked to a corkboard, circling an abandoned, overgrown estate on the city's outskirts. This was their original meeting place, and according to my old informants, they still use it for special occasions. I think it's where they keep their secrets. And perhaps the proof. The implication hung heavy in the air, a terrifying roadmap to the heart of the serpent's coil, and to Kenji's ultimate betrayal. After Detective Corbin's chilling revelations, the weight of the truth pressed down on Alara, but also ignited a fierce resolve. The abandoned estate, a place shrouded in decades of dark secrets, felt like the only path forward. Aisha, ever loyal, squeezed her hand, her expression a mix of fear and unwavering support. "We have to go there, Miles," Alara stated, her voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. "It's the only way to get proof, to truly understand what Kenji is involved in." Corbin, his weary, "It's dangerous, Alara. More dangerous than you can imagine. These people, they protect their secrets with extreme prejudice." He paused, rubbing his temples, then slowly reached into a desk drawer, pulling out a small, heavy-duty flashlight and a compact, encrypted walkie-talkie. "If you insist, take these. And for God's sake, be careful. If you find anything at all, you call me immediately. Do not confront anyone." The abandoned estate loomed against the twilight sky, a skeletal silhouette of forgotten grandeur and decay. Overgrown vines snaked around crumbling stone walls, and the air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and neglect. Alara's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs as she and Aisha approached the rusted, creaking gates, the small flashlight in her hand casting a nervous beam into the gloom. "Are you sure about this, Alara?" Aisha whispered, her voice tight with apprehension, clutching her small. "It feels wrong." "We're already here," Alara replied, her voice barely a whisper, forcing herself to push past the knot of fear in her stomach. "We have to know." They navigated a winding, weed-choked path, the silence of the grounds broken only by the crunch of their footsteps and the distant hoot of an owl. The main house, a sprawling Victorian edifice, stared out at them with vacant, shattered windows, like hollow. Every shadow seemed to shift, every gust of wind sounded like a whisper, amplifying their growing sense of dread. Inside the crumbling mansion, dust motes danced in the sparse beams of Alara's flashlight, illuminating cobweb-draped furniture and peeling wallpaper. Each floorboard creaked under their cautious steps, echoing eerily through the cavernous rooms. They moved through a grand, decaying ballroom, its once lustrous parquet floor now warped and stained, before finding themselves in a library, shelves overflowing with ancient, moldering tomes. Aisha gasped, pointing to a section of the wall behind a large, empty fireplace. "Look, Alara, that wallpaper, it's newer, and it doesn't quite match." Alara shone her flashlight closer, her breath catching as she noticed a faint seam, almost imperceptible, where the pattern subtly shifted. With a shared glance, they pushed against it, and with a groan of rusted hinges, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark, narrow passage leading down into the earth. The air that rushed out was cold, stagnant, and carried a faint, unsettling metallic scent. Hesitation warred with their desperate need for answers, but the pull of the unknown was stronger. The passage descended into a suffocating darkness, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. It opened into a vast subterranean chamber, unlike anything they could have imagined. In the center, illuminated by what appeared to be flickering oil lamps, stood a large circular stone altar, etched with the familiar intertwined serpent symbol. Around it, several figures in dark hooded robes stood motionless, their backs to Alara and Aisha. On the altar itself, resting on a velvet cushion, was a thick, leather-bound ledger. Its pages opened to what looked like a list of names. Alara's Sibley, other names from the faded photographs. This was the proof. Just as Alara reached for her walkie-talkie to contact Corbin, a voice, cold and dangerously familiar, cut through the silence. "I knew you couldn't stay away, Alara." Kenji stepped out from the shadows, not in a tailored, holding a small ornate dagger. "You've gone too far." Kenji's words hung heavy in the stale air of the underground chamber, his voice a cruel echo of the man she once loved. Alara stared at him, the ornate dagger glinting menacingly in his hand, a stark symbol of his betrayal. The hooded figures remained silent, their presence a suffocating pressure. Aisha, her face pale with terror, instinctively stepped closer to Alara, a silent plea for protection. "Kenji, please," Alara whispered, her voice cracking with despair and defiance. "What is this? You don't have to do this." He merely smirked, a cold, unfamiliar expression that twisted her gut. "It's too late for please, Alara. You've seen too much. You've threatened everything." His gaze flickered to the open ledger on the altar, then back to her, a chilling possessiveness in his. The flickering oil lamps cast dancing shadows, making the ancient symbols on the altar seem to writhe. She knew then that there was no turning back. The true battle for her life and for the truth had just begun. Her hand instinctively went to the walkie-talkie in her pocket, a desperate hope flickering within her. Alara's fingers tightened around the walkie-talkie, but before she could activate it, Kenji lunged, not at her, but towards the altar. He snatched the ledger, clutching it fiercely to his chest as if it were a sacred relic. "This ledger," he declared, his voice echoing with a fanatical fervor, "holds the names of our lineage, our power. It's the Serpent's Coil, Alara, the true architects of this city. We control everything." He then turned the dagger on the binding of the ancient book, a desperate act of preservation. Aisha let out a small gasp, pulling Alara back a step, away from Kenji's sudden, unhinged intensity. "Kenji, stop! This isn't you!" Alara cried, her plea laced with a mixture of heartbreak and growing horror. He ignored her, The hooded figures shifted, a murmur rippling through them, their silent devotion to Kenji unsettling. He was not just a member. He was deeply, fanatically entrenched, a chosen successor to a dark legacy. The air grew thick with a sense of impending doom, as Kenji began to chant in a low, guttural language, his voice resonating with an ancient power. Just as Kenji's eerie chant reached a crescendo, a sharp metallic crackle erupted from Alara's hand. She had managed to activate the walkie-talkie, and Detective Corbin's voice, raspy but clear, cut through the chamber's oppressive silence. "Alara, what's your status?" "I'm outside, I hear chanting." Kenji froze, The hooded figures stirred, their heads snapping towards the sound. Seizing the moment of distraction, Aisha, with a surge of unexpected courage, kicked out, knocking Kenji off balance. The ledger flew from his grasp, sliding across the stone floor. Alara lunged, grabbing it before he could recover. "It's over, Kenji!" she yelled, holding the book aloft. Sirens wailed faintly from above, growing louder with each passing second, piercing the night and the ancient conspiracy. The hooded figures, now in disarray, looked around nervously, their dark ritual irrevocably broken. Kenji, realizing the full extent of his exposure, made a desperate dash towards a hidden passage in the far wall, a last-ditch attempt to escape the inevitable. Months later, the chilling events of the Serpent's Coil were a distant yet indelible memory. Kenji had been apprehended, exposed, and faced a barrage of charges, his family's dark legacy shattered for good. Ilara, though scarred, emerged stronger. She sat with Aisha on her sun-drenched patio, sipping herbal tea, the warmth a comforting contrast to the cold dread she had once known. "It's still hard to believe," Aisha murmured, watching a butterfly flit by. "Everything you went through." Ilara nodded, a quiet strength in her gaze. "I lost a husband, but I found myself, Aisha. And I saved more than just my own life." Detective Corbin, now a celebrated figure, had officially reopened countless cold cases. The ledger Ilara had retrieved providing irrefutable evidence. She had moved out of the house she once shared with Kenji, starting fresh in a smaller, sunnier apartment, free from the shadows of betrayal. The trauma had reshaped her, but not broken her. She learned to trust her instincts, to embrace her resilience, and to find peace in the quiet moments, knowing she had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. Her life, though different, was finally truly her own. Thanks for watching His Late Night Lie, a GPS trail to a shattered truth. On your channel name, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more thrilling dramas.